This is Land of Havilah, Ezekiel 16a. In this proverb, Yahweh will tell a long parable involving a baby. Verse 1. Again Yahweh's word came to me, saying, Son of man, cause Jerusalem to know her abominations, and say, Thus says the Lord Yahweh to Jerusalem, Your origin and your birth is of the land of the Canaanite. An Amorite was your father, and your mother was a Hittite. As for your birth, in the day you were born, your navel was not cut. You weren't washed in water to cleanse you. You weren't salted at all, nor swaddled at all. No eye pitied you to do any of these things to you, to have compassion on you, but you were cast out in the open field, because you were abhorred in the day that you were born. When I passed by you and saw you wallowing in your blood, I said to you, Though you are in your blood, live. Yes, I said to you, Though you are in your blood, live. I caused you to multiply as that which grows in the field, and you increased and grew great, and you attained to excellent ornament. Your breasts were formed, and your hair grew, yet you were naked and bare. Now when I passed by you and looked at you, behold, your time was the time of love, and I spread my skirt over you and covered your nakedness. Yes, I swore to you and entered into a covenant with you, says the Lord Yahweh, and you became mine. Then I washed you with water. Yes, I thoroughly washed away your blood from you, and I anointed you with oil. I clothed you also with embroidered work, and put sealskin shoes on you. I dressed you with fine linen, and covered you with silk. I decked you with ornaments, put bracelets on your hands, and a chain on your neck. I put a ring on your nose, and earrings in your ears, and a beautiful crown on your head. Thus you were decked with gold and silver. Your clothing was of fine linen, silk, and embroidered work. You ate fine flour, honey, and oil. You were exceedingly beautiful, and you prospered to royal estate. Your renown went out among the nations for your beauty, for it was perfect, through my majesty which I had put on you, says the Lord Yahweh. Comment in verses 1 and 2, Yahweh's word came to Ezekiel to teach Jerusalem how repulsive her sins are, to cause her to know her abominations, it says. To accomplish that purpose, he begins a parable in verse 3 and continues it to the end of the chapter, which is 63 verses total. In the beginning of it that we just read, a baby was born in the land of Canaan of an Amorite father and Hittite mother. Yahweh says, You, Jerusalem, are the baby. Canaanites, Amorites, and Hittites were among the 7 nations which Yahweh said he would drive out and cut off for their abominations. Exodus 23, 23, and 24. So for the baby Jerusalem to be born in Canaan of Amorite and Hittite parents was a highly inauspicious start. The Israelites shied away from their Canaanite roots. They emphasized their Mesopotamian and Syrian origins, Deuteronomy 26:5, Genesis 24:3, and 28:6-8. Yet they did a lot of mixing with the Canaanites, Genesis 38. So in this allegory, Yahweh is emphasizing the humbler side of their genealogy. In verses 4 and on, the baby's parents rejected her at birth. She was abhorred the day she was born. Her umbilical cord was left uncut, and she was cast into an open field, bloody, unwashed, and naked, still attached to her umbilical cord and placenta, without the comfort of even a swaddling cloth. In verse 6, God passed by, saw her wallowing in her blood, and took pity. He issued a command for her to live. In verse 7, she grew and matured, yet she was still naked and bare, which means she was exposed to the elements spiritually speaking. Genesis 3:21. God had not yet taken her in, made a covenant with her, and clothed her with protection. In verse 8, the time of love arrived, and God spread his skirt over her, which in that culture means he initiated intimacy with her and took her in marriage. Ruth 3:9, quote, I swore to you and entered a covenant with you, and you became mine, end quote. In verses 9-14, God washed her, thoroughly removed the blood, anointed her, put fine clothing on her, and gave her gold and silver jewelry of every type, bracelets, a necklace, a nose ring, earrings, and a crown. He gave her the finest foods and delicacies, made her completely beautiful, and gave her a royal estate, so much that her renown went out among the nations for the perfection and majesty God had given her. This was Jerusalem among the nations. Naturally, Jerusalem should have appreciated God, but going on, verse 15. But you trusted in your beauty and played the prostitute because of your renown, and poured out your prostitution on everyone who passed by. It was his. You took some of your garments and made for yourselves high places decked with various colors, and played the prostitute on them. This shall not happen, neither shall it be. You also took your beautiful jewels of my gold and of my silver, which I had given to you, and made for yourself images of men, and played the prostitute with them. You took your embroidered garments, covered them, and set my oil and my incense before them. My bread also, which I gave you, fine flour, oil, and honey, which I fed you, you even set it before them for a pleasant aroma, and so it was, says the Lord Yahweh. Comment in verse 15, Jerusalem departed from God. He had made her beautiful, but rather than trusting in the one who made her that way, she trusted in the beauty. She played the prostitute with everyone who passed by, which means the people of Jerusalem cavorted with every so-called deity. In verse 16, she took some of the fine clothing God gave her, used the fabric to make tents, colorful tents, and placed the tents on tops of hills to worship her deities. Oh no, God says, this shall not happen. I'll not let this continue. In verse 17, she melted down the jewelry God gave her and made silver and gold idols in the likeness of men. In verse 18, she took more of the clothing God had given her and clothed her idols with it. She offered her idols everything God had given her, setting before them oil, incense, fine flour, and honey. Whatever God gave her, she offered to her idols, and so it was. Still speaking of Jerusalem, Yahweh says, verse 20, Moreover, you have taken your sons and your daughters, whom you have borne to me, and you have sacrificed these to them to be devoured. Was your prostitution a small matter, that you have slain my children and delivered them up, in causing them to pass through the fire to them? In all your abominations and your prostitution you have not remembered the days of your youth, when you were naked and bare, and were wallowing in your blood. It has happened after all your wickedness. Woe, woe to you, says the Lord Yahweh, that you have built for yourselves a vaulted place, and have made yourselves a lofty place in every street. You have built your lofty place at the head of every way, and have made your beauty an abomination, and have opened your feet to everyone who passed by, and multiplied your prostitution. You've also committed sexual immorality with the Egyptians, your neighbors, great of flesh, and have multiplied your prostitution to provoke me to anger. Comment in verses 20 and 21, Jerusalem bore children to God, and she turned around and sacrificed those children to other gods. Is it a small matter that she sacrificed God's children to her other gods, burning them in fire to those gods? 2 Kings 23:10. In verse 22, never in all her abominations did she contemplate the day of her birth, when she was in the field naked, wallowing in her blood. In verses 23 to 25, woe to you, Jerusalem, for you've constructed big fancy buildings with vaulted ceilings on every street in town for worshiping your gods. In verses 25 and 26, you spread your legs to every god that passed by. Furthermore, you idolized the Egyptians, Isaiah 30, verses 1 to 7. You acted like a slut lusting after the Egyptians' great flesh, and you've committed many similar acts of spiritual prostitution to provoke me to anger. Verse 27. See, therefore, I have stretched out my hand over you, and have diminished your portion, and delivered you to the will of those who hate you, the daughters of the Philistines, who are ashamed of your lewd way. You have played the prostitute also with the Assyrians, because you were insatiable. Yes, you have played the prostitute with them, and yet you weren't satisfied. You have, moreover, multiplied your prostitution to the land of merchants, to Chaldea, and yet you weren't satisfied with this. How weak is your heart, says the Lord Yahweh, since you do all these things, the work of an impudent prostitute, in that you build your vaulted place at the head of every way, and make your lofty place in every street, and have not been as a prostitute, in that you scorn pay. A wife who commits adultery, who takes strangers instead of her husband? People give gifts to all prostitutes, but you give your gifts to all your lovers and bribe them that they may come to you on every side for your prostitution. You're different from other women in your prostitution in that no one follows you to play the prostitute, and whereas you give hire and no hire is given to you, therefore you are different. Comment in verse 27, Yahweh says, Jerusalem, I have diminished your portion and delivered you to the will of the Philistines. In 2 Chronicles 28:18-19, the Philistines diminished Judah by taking some of her cities. In verse 28, you've played the prostitute with the Assyrians. One example was when Judean King Ahaz feared invasion and went to the king of Assyria for military protection. Ahaz paid him with treasures from Yahweh's temple and made himself the king of Assyria's vassal. Yahweh would have protected the king of Judah and given him preeminence over his enemies, but instead he served the king of Assyria, 2 Kings 16:7. In verse 29, Jerusalem played the prostitute with Chaldea, the land of merchants. There was an infatuation with Chaldean culture, Ezekiel 23:14-17. Yahweh resented any sort of infatuation or dependency. In verse 30, Judah's infatuation with everything foreign was indicative of a weak heart and of her impudence toward Yahweh. She trusted and was infatuated with foreign gods, nations, kings, cultures, militaries, and economies, but not Yahweh. In verses 31-34, Jerusalem is unique among prostitutes. Ordinarily, prostitutes demand to be paid, but in Jerusalem's case, she pays. She gives everything she has to participate in her prostitution and does it for the enjoyment. She scorns her husband Yahweh, forgets what he's done for her, and uses everything he's given her to chase after everything other than him. The parable of the baby Yahweh took in continues at Land of Havilah, Ezekiel 16b.